Welcome to Security Architecture Podcast, where we help cybersecurity professionals to stay ahead of the curve and ensure they are successful in their cybersecurity journey.
Hi, I'm Evgeny.
Hi, I'm Dimitri.
We have a pleasure today to have Tal from Perception Point. Tal, can you please introduce yourself and the company?
Hi, Dimitri. Hi, Evgeny. Great to be here. My name is Tal Zamir. I'm the CTO at Perception Point, previously the CTO and founder of Hysolate, which is part of the technology we'll talk about.
Excellent. So Perception Point does few interesting things. Is there a name for the technology that addressing the browser security?
Definitely. So the browser security product is basically called Advanced Browser Security. And as you mentioned, it's just one piece of the big Perception Point platform, and we'll touch on that later on.
I'm happy you guys didn't call it next-gen browser.
We're trying to avoid the next-gen term as much as we can.
Got you. So you probably know that we are a podcast about architecture. So we definitely want to understand and dive in right away about the architecture and how you guys build. And if you want to share your screen or show something, we're more than happy to see it.
Perfect. So let me pull a slide just to walk you through our architecture. So as I mentioned, the product is Advanced Browser Security, and what it practically does is adding multiple layers of security to standard browsers, be it Chrome or Edge, protecting organizations against external, internal threats in the browser in a native compatible way. Just to give you a few items here in this slide. So we obviously run on both corporate and third-party or personal endpoints. We don't really care. And we have two main variants of this offering, I would say. The first one is a browser extension that runs in any standard browser. And this one provides you with full-blown detection capabilities, DLP governance into the browser. And there's a VM-based solution, which basically takes the browser and wraps it around with a local virtual machine running on the endpoint and provides strong isolation of the browser from the rest of the environment. So it adds, on top of the detection and DLP controls, also VM-based isolation of the browser. So that's kind of the two variants of the product, and it depends on what the customer is trying to achieve. You'll have a choice here. And of course, everything here is managed from the cloud, hosted on AWS, where you can configure policies, investigate issues, incidents, and so on through the Perception Point admin console. And another important aspect, which I think is kind of unique here in this architecture, is that it doesn't only cover the browser, but you can go to Perception Point to also integrate into email, collaboration apps, storage apps. So we see the whole picture, not just the browser, and can make informed decisions based on the entirety of those emails, as well as having this as a managed service. So if you want help from our incident response team that's available 24/7, we can actually extend your SOC team when you bump into incidents. So that's kind of the high-level overview of the main blocks. One thing I want to mention here as well is that in our solution, there's no tunneling of traffic that we force you to do or remoting. It's all happening locally, and you just directly access the web apps that you need to access from the browser that you're used to working with, be it SaaS apps, internal apps, risky websites.
So the enforcement happening locally.
Exactly. So on the other hand, of course, we can support anything in between, and we'll talk about it perhaps later on. But that's the high-level architecture.
So what you're saying is that there's like two ways of getting this product. Either I'm installing an extension on my existing browser, and I see that Chrome and Edge support it, or you actually can run for me a version of Chrome or Edge in a VM on my machine.
Exactly. And it's still a standard Chrome or Edge. We don't change anything about it. We just add the security controls on top of it, be it through the extension or through the virtual machine that we wrap the browser with.
Nice. And I have a question. I know that you have very interesting email offering. Would I be able to see a link that I clicked in the email and opened in the browser and correlate these two events?
Exactly. So when I'm talking about those additional integrations, that's exactly one of the use cases. So think about you getting an email, and we scan that email regardless of the browser, but sometimes you cannot fully detect things just by looking at the email, because only when the user clicks the link and views it in its own browser, on his own endpoint, will the malicious payload arrive, because attackers are smart enough to evade scanning just in the email. And they wait for the link, the phishing link, for example, to be opened in a real browser before they activate their malicious intent, right? And because we can see both of those evidences on the email and on the browser, we can actually detect things in a better way. But even if you didn't buy our email security product, you still get all of our knowledge of detection for phishing website, malicious files, and what have you, even if you only have the browser channel.
Nice. So you know what? Tell me then about user. If you compare user experience to the normal browser, what the user experience in this case with extension or with VM? Is there any overhead, like slowness, some latency that I see, or anything like that?
Great question. So for the extension, it's completely standard native experience, the same experience you have with a browser, because we run out of band, right? We kind of use standard APIs in the browser to inspect and gather evidence and do whatever we need to do for detection, DLP, and so on, without changing anything about the user's experience. You just work normally, and we do the security out of band in the background, and we'll only intervene and show you some prompt or block you if we find that you bumped into something malicious. So the experience here is exactly identical to native. And also important to mention, I know some other technologies are trying to kind of do DOM reconstruction of the content that you view in the browser, or they intervene with the JavaScript engine with all kinds of hooking or manipulations. But we, on purpose, decided not to go down that path. We wanted to be 100% compatible with whatever web content we bump into. And with this architecture of a native browser extension, it's completely compatible with any web technology that you throw at us. So that's on the extension side. The VM is pretty much the same, but we do have another layer of a virtual machine wrapping the browser. So it can't be 100% identical to native performance, but we invested a lot of effort into this lightweight virtual machine technology. It's not just standard bloated virtual machine that you know from your probably past experience with virtual machines. It's actually a very light and optimized virtual machine for this use case, where the browser is running almost natively. You can actually run Zoom calls like what we're doing right now inside the browser and anything else you would expect without noticing the difference. But in some cases, on extreme cases, you might notice latency if you're on a very low end device or something of that sort. And so you have a choice. You can decide to get the best type of security that we can offer based on the device that you have. If you have a high-end device or a better device, you can use the full-blown solution, including the virtualization. If you don't have a high-end device, you can just go with the extension and you get a lot of the functionality as well.
Great. Now, the entire kind of movement in cybersecurity is going towards zero trust architecture, zero trust approach. Zero trust, in my mind and many other people, is built on who you are, my identity, and not source, stuff like that. Identity may also include what kind of laptop. So how do you guys interact, connect with single sign-on, with IAM, with IDP to understand who is Evgeny, what Evgeny can or cannot do?
Great question. So there's a bunch of ways we integrate into those solutions. The first one is the enforcement part of how you can make sure that users are using our secure browser, a browser security solution, when they access your enterprise apps. So you can very easily, with an integration with identity and access management solutions, zero trust, VPN, or identity providers, as you can see here, this dotted line into your identity provider or IAM solution. Once you integrate the two, we can make sure that the only way to access your enterprise SaaS apps or even your internal apps is done through a browser that has the extension or the virtual machine security. Otherwise, you just won't have access. So any other browser which doesn't have our protection, like when you install your custom browser on the device or you use some other unsupported device, you would not be able to access those apps in any other way. So ensuring zero trust is enforced end-to-end. You can only access sensitive enterprise apps through a secure browser is something, one of the integrations we're able to do with any standard DTNA or what have you solution. A second aspect here, which is kind of unique to our solution, is when you go to the VM option, you can run inside the VM not just the browsers, you can also run things like a zero trust agent or a VPN agent or many other applications that you need, like auxiliary apps for accessing your network. So you can make sure in, let's say, a personal device, BYOD device, that you only connect the virtual machine into your network and into your cloud apps, and any other thing running on the laptop will be locked out because those VPN clients or zero trust clients will run inside a virtual machine, and the rest of your laptop will be out of the network, out of access to those apps. I hope I'm making sense, but it's a way to kind of extend zero trust all the way to the endpoint and run the standard agents from those third-party zero trust VPN providers on the endpoint in an isolated, secure way.
Is there a way to prevent Evgeny to access AWS, for example, if it doesn't have an extension?
Yes. So we also support in the extension case the enforcement of accessing only from that browser, again, with either Microsoft's conditional access features or Google context-aware access. There's a way to enforce that the only way you access the AWS app is through the extension. Actually, I want to show you a demo of this in action. Actually, I have this as a demonstration, if you don't mind. Let me quickly show you first the VM-based solution where we have the exact example that you talked about. So this is, let's say, a BYOD or third-party device where you have lots of different apps and what have you, malware on that laptop. And you want to make sure that the user only accesses the sensitive apps, be it the AWS app or anything else, from the secure browser. So now when the user tries to access AWS from his normal browser, the non-isolated browser, so I go here and I go to AWS, I won't be able to access AWS from my standard browser. I'll be blocked, in this case, by the Google Zero Trust solution, which will tell me, hey, you can't connect from this browser to AWS. And automatically, we will pop up the Perception Point secure browser, in this case, running in the VM. You see that we have a special orange theme just to differentiate it, but we want to make sure we don't mix that with the rest of your browser and your environment. And here you will access all of the AWS application, do whatever you need to do for your work, but this is all running within an isolated environment with all of our security controls. So when you download a file, like the CSV file, you can't copy and paste it out or drag and drop it out. It stays locked within the virtual machine and encrypted on your BYOD device in that virtual disk. So you can only open that file within the browser and not anywhere else. So as you can see here, I'm opening the CSV file inside that secure browser, and I can decide what kind of policies are in place regarding copy and paste or anything else. In my case, I can allow copy and paste of text out of this browser, like I'm doing here, but I might not be allowing codes or files and so on. Last thing, if we're already in this demo, just to demonstrate the solution in a visual way, if I have some kind of malware on my laptop, on my BYOD, in this case, it's a very old keylogger that I'm running here on the laptop, that keylogger will be able to capture everything that I type in my normal browser or in any normal application, as you can see here, but it won't be able to capture text I'm typing into the secure browser because it's running in a completely isolated virtual machine, which are virtual disk, keyboard, mouse, screen. You cannot see anything out of that BYOD device inside the secure browser. And same goes for screenshots. Just in another example here, if I take a screenshot of the screen as a user or as malware, I'm going to end up with this black rectangle where the browser used to be. So that's kind of demonstrating the local isolation in the virtual machine, but you can do much of this through the extension as well, just to demonstrate how it looks like in real life.
This is very impressive. Thank you.
Can you prevent someone taking a picture with his phone?
That's a great question. So actually, we have a watermark feature where you can put some kind of subtle watermark on the browser or with whatever website, or only for sensitive websites that it's the user that has accessed this website. So even if you take with your smartphone a video or a photo, it will be hard for you to scrub out all of this watermarking. It's a deterrent factor, not a full protection against those scenarios, but still very effective.
Nice. I have another question. So the VM version, does it support PC, Mac, Android, iOS?
The VM variant of this product supports Windows and Mac, not yet mobile devices, because virtualization on mobile devices is not up to speed with the technologies on PCs. But as I mentioned, for those devices, you can still go with our extension-based approach, which works on any device that supports browser extensions. And this is Chrome OS, Linux, any device that supports browser extensions.
Thank you. Is there any difference when you're accessing internal web-based resources, especially like what we see in the industry is that there is some old applications that only can run on some very ancient Internet Explorer version?
So we definitely support both internal apps that are behind a VPN, on-prem, or in any way you need to access those. As I mentioned before, you can easily plug this into your VPN or zero trust solution to getting access into those internal apps. And beyond that, because we run the standard browser, be it Edge with an extension or in a VM, you can just use Edge IE mode, Internet Explorer mode, which lets you access legacy apps. And that's the only actually supported way by Microsoft to access legacy Internet Explorer websites. Other options are kind of partially supported. So we support it because of the compatibility with the standard browser.
I have a follow-up question on that. You said that you can install a ZTNA solution or VPN solution in the virtualized environment. Yep. How would you do that? Like, let's say if I have some global protect client or anything like that.
So we have a mechanism through a management console to deploy applications in the VM. Basically, it's just dragging and dropping, let's say, an MSI or executable or what have you that installs the agent. We can even wrap it with a script if you need some custom stuff inside that ZTNA agent or VPN client. And as soon as you deploy it in the management console, all of the VMs will be created with this agent as part of it. So it's really making it super simple for users. They just install a single application, which is our agent in the case of the virtual machine. And we deploy the VM with a browser, with the Zero Trust agent or VPN agent. So it's really super simple for enterprises to start this.
Okay. You mentioned that you are installed and work along the way of URL filtering and other ZTNA solutions. And I'm wondering, are you complementary or you also do some kind of inspection as well?
Great question. So yes, we are complementary, for example, to SWG solutions and other kind of filtering solutions. In some cases, some companies take us as an alternative to SWG solutions. And maybe I'll show also some of the capabilities I talked about in the detection realm, just to clarify why that's true. But typically we would complement and add another layer of security in the browser where those secure gateways don't reach, right? They don't see what's happening within the browser and cannot have visibility into the user's action or to advanced attacks that bypass those secure web gateways. Let me just show you another demo just to demonstrate this for you real quick. So in this case, I'm going with the extension example just to show you how it looks like with the extension. And I'm working on a corporate laptop and I have a bunch of stuff here and I want to make sure I'm protected inside the browser as well. So my enterprise, my IT department deployed this perception point extension over here. You can see the little orange icon here. So now I'm going into this RFP URL that I got in some SaaS app. Doesn't matter where I'm getting this URL from. And this is actually a phishing website. And in a blink of the eye, we actually dynamically detected that this is a phishing website. And it's important to state the word dynamically, because we're not basing this on some static threat intelligence feeds or doing something which is based on signatures. This is actually collecting evidence dynamically from the browser that the user is using, sending it to the cloud and deciding based on our cumulative knowledge, machine learning, and so on, whether it's a phishing website or not. In this case, it's indeed a phishing website. And as you would expect, you get a blog page and you can actually see the reasons why we think it's a phishing website. And in some cases, you can even click to visit this unsafe website anyway for some users if that's the policy. And now if I'm visiting this site, I can actually see that it's a very convincing phishing website. You can see here the bad guys did some pretty good job, not perfect, but trying to create a Microsoft impersonation website. And this is what we were able to detect very quickly and dynamically while scanning all of that content. So that's one example of secure web gateway functionality that we can extend and enhance. And another example in this demo is when you download the file. And here as well, we have very unique technology. This is not based on some third-party feed or something. When you download this zip file, we scan it in the background in the cloud, upload this file to the cloud, and recursively unpack the file, look for malicious content deep inside that malicious file, including running any documents that are embedded inside that file in a sandbox in the cloud to look for exploits in real time, 0 days and other stuff. So in this case, indeed, that zip file was malicious and was blocked. And this is based on annual tests being done by third parties, coming up first in accuracy compared to all of the vendors doing both email security and other spaces in our ability to detect malicious content. So that's another example of how we can enhance the secure web gateway or other alternatives for content filtering. I'm going to shut up now because it's a long answer to your question, but just to demonstrate this a bit for you.
Very impressive.
Thank you.
So that's our next question, which is about bring your own devices. How you install or provision the solution to these devices? Like, what's the journey of the end user?
So it's as simple as we mentioned earlier that you can ensure that the only way to access web apps is if you have our extension or our VM. So as soon as you set up this integration, you can make sure that on a BYOD device or a third-party device, there's no way to access your web apps unless you have the extension. And the only thing the administrator needs to do is that For example, when you sign into Chrome, we'll automatically push the extension down to the BYOD device through the Google policies or Microsoft policies. And then your device is protected and the browser is protected with all of the detection, DLP, isolation features, depending on what product you deployed. And this is how you can protect BYOD devices in this case. I hope I answered your question.
Okay, so you're saying that there is a MDM integration, where you can actually enforce this supposed to be installed on any device that logging into our
yes, exactly. But important to mention, you don't have to enroll the endpoint in an MDM device to do so. Because today with Microsoft and Google, for example, in their ecosystem, it's as simple as saying, when you're using Edge or Chrome to access my app, only the browser and the work profile of the browser will be enrolled in a sense and will have the extension. And you don't take over the user's entire device. My personal device at home, I don't want my work to take over the entire device. So I can just take over the work profile of the user on the standard Chrome or Edge browser and add all of our security controls into that.
So it's based on the conditional access of Google and Microsoft, if you have the license.
Exactly. It's in conjunction with the conditional access of zero trust functionality and the ability to control browser policies when you're accessing web apps.
Now, I have a follow-up questions about extensions. So this is amazing we have your own extensions. What about other extensions people install? Because we're learning every day that we install an extension for my weather, and apparently in 3 months now it's collecting all my passwords.
Definitely. So of course, it's interesting also in the context of advanced browser security and our offering, we give you visibility into all of the extensions that the user deployed in the browser, either by the user installing it or some third-party malware installing those extensions. And we're also working on detecting malicious extensions. We don't have yet that functionality today, but we are giving you visibility. In the isolation case, it's also important to mention that we can make sure that if you have any malicious extension on your normal browser on the device, it won't get mixed with the browser that's isolated with the VM. So it doesn't matter what extension you deployed or whether we detect it or not, it will be completely isolated from the work browser that you're using.
So can you define which extensions will be available to the user? In VM, as example, I want all my users to have LastPass extension installed.
Yep, definitely. In the VM variant, we can fully control all the browser policies, including forcing the installation of extensions, blocking extensions, and so on.
So you can even block them. So if you identify extensions malicious, you can block it from working and operating.
Setting through the management console, you can just block everything.
Lovely. Tal, so let's get to the visibility part. How the organization can view the reports of attacks or prevent things by technology or get some reports about what kind of risks being exposed by what user?
Right. So the investigation platform and the management console gives you a full-blown visibility and reporting into all of the incidents that were detected by the system. And I'll go back to the continuation of the demo that we just showed, where I detected malware on the endpoint through the extension, where someone downloaded a zip file and then it was blocked. So behind the scenes for the admin or the analyst looking at those incidents, they can actually see exactly what happened, why we think it's malware. And this is pretty sophisticated. It's the same platform we use for not just the browser, but for email security and the other channels. And you can see here that there's malware detected by our hardware-assisted sandbox. Just to explain what that means, we actually have part of our core IP in the company, the ability to run on bare metal servers in the cloud with full processor tracing of all the instructions running while we're launching a document or stuff like that, and look at the instructions, see if there's anything abnormal happening, indicating a 0-day or exploit. So in this example, the zip file that I downloaded was actually digested and recursively unpacked. So there's a zip containing an RTF file, dropping another RTF file, and you can see all of that in our console, including the ability to really dive into the details. So if you go down, you'll see what is the evidence that us to believe that this is malware, and exactly the signatures and so on, but also you can see the document embedded inside the zip that within the 10 seconds of scanning was launched in a Word document, a Word application. And you can actually see an animated GIF of this Word application launching in our cloud sandbox and viewing the document, the malicious document and everything in it. So there's actually an embedded macro and the attackers are trying to convince you to enable editing, but the user didn't get to see any of that because we blocked them before they got to see any of that. So we actually launched Word in the background with processor tracing and saw that the document contains something that triggered the process creation. This is actually the instructions in the CPU and the launching of the executable out of Word, and even the malicious obfuscated macro that was part of this Word file. So as a security analyst, this is great, and you can really dive into the details and understand what's happening here. And you don't have to do any of that. That's just out of, if you want to dive deeper, you can use our managed service to do all of that and request investigation from our cybersecurity experts to help you investigate false positives or anything that you suspect is unusual. So that's kind of an example of the investigation platform here.
It's very powerful, but I have a simple question. Let's assume that I got zip file with a password from someone that I know, and I want to get it. I'm assuming by default you're going to block it, but how am I blocking it?
Great question. So basically for password protected zip files, in our email security today, we have an option to ask the user for the password. So the user, if he knows the password, he can send over the password, and then we only release the file once they provide a password. And we're building the same functionality into the browser solution. So if you're downloading a file that is password protected, we're going to ask you for the password as a user before we release the file to you. Or we can completely block any password protected file, but that's not what you typically want as a customer.
Exactly. Makes sense. Thank you.
We're done with the official questions, and we have kind of an pretty much open conversation. If you have any questions to us?
I think I'd only want to add just one more point about the power of this extension and some of the stuff that it can do. So we talked about the detection, and I didn't actually get to show you some of the DLP functionality, which is becoming more and more of interest to our customers. Maybe just to complete the story, because we talked about isolation, we talked about detection, we didn't show any of the DLP functionality. I'm just going to give you a glimpse of that in the time we have left. So here we have, again, that same browser, and you can do things like, before we go into DLP, limit types of files like executables and other stuff from being downloaded by file type, which is kind of basic, but important for enterprises to do and control what you can download in the browser, even if it's not malicious. Like, I don't want users to download executables, or I don't want users to download doc files out of my Google Drive. You can fully control that with the extension. And furthermore, you can control for any SaaS app what kind of copying and pasting and other stuff can be done from this website. Without any VM or any isolation, you still gain control over content in your sensitive web apps. So here, when the user tries to copy content out of this CRM website, and it could be some unknown SaaS app that no one have heard of, and no API integration exists, because we run in a browser, we can control copy and paste in this example. So when you take content out of this web app and go to Word and try to paste it, you won't be able to do so, and we'll just give you this blocked content or whatever message you want when you do the paste. And it works not just with other apps, but also within the browser. When you copy and paste into Pastebin, you won't be able to do so, and you will be blocked.
This is sometimes could be a reverse problem as well. When I'm going to my company SharePoint and I want to copy something to my Outlook, for example, in the allowed part, so can I be more precise or what I can or cannot do? Because this could be very pain.
Yeah, you can define the path. Like you could say, from salesforce.com, I only allow into, let's say, OneDrive or whatever corporate app or set of corporate apps that are allowed, but I'm not allowing it into any random app.
Can I copy paste between the tabs?
Yes. So between tabs that are allowed, for example, in this case, this CRM web app, I don't want it to be copied out into Pastebin, but I do want to allow it to another tab from that CRM website or another trusted enterprise app, if I'm answering your question, Dimitri.
Yeah, you are. And how are you defining these permissions? Because it sounds to me super complex to kind of build such profiles, right? Like, is it by domain? Is it something else?
Right. So there's a bunch of configuration that I showed you a bit of it, but maybe I can pull out the rest of the configuration. Let me just bring this up for you. So basically you have an investigation or forensics platform to seeing all the security events. And there's a platform for the ones configuring the policies and kind of controls in the system. I'll just give you a glimpse of what I have available for you right now, including the rules. There we go. So basically, there's a way to define all of the options that I've shown you earlier around, detection of malicious download, detection of malicious websites, furs of content, copy and pasting, network controls, blocking categories. So just to show you a bit more of that. So you have here all of the categories that will be blocked and so on. And if you want something more complex, like, precedence between rules and stuff like that, that's something that we're enhancing to give you like full granularity into everything you want. Some of this stuff will only be available through advanced configs that you configure here, but most of the functionality that I showed you is just in straightforward controls within our console.
Makes sense. So Tal, Do you see yourself playing in the SSE space as a vendor?
So it's a good question because Perception Point has a lot of building blocks that go way beyond browser security. And I think that's part of the power because, you're not just buying a point solution from a browser vendor, but rather buying a solution that can cover almost any user-facing threat. We're not covering everything that SSE does today. Like we're not a zero trust vendor and we're not doing a lot of the stuff that is part of these bigger buckets, but we're gradually adding more and more functionality. There's no name to this collection of functionality that we have today. I'm typically calling it like protecting enterprise against any kind of user-facing threat, be it on browser, email, collaboration apps, storage apps, and so on. But we'll definitely look into consolidating this into a bigger category down the road.
Tal, thank you very much. Very, very informative. A lot of good information. Looks like you guys moving to the right direction with combining a lot of the important functionality. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tal.
Welcome. Thanks for having me on the show.
Thank you.
Please remember to subscribe to our podcast and join us for our next episode.